I stopped last time on page 7, so I'll go through this. We'll start here. We now proceed in the actual introduction to awareness. This section shall only be dealt with cursorily because it mainly concerns the difference between various philosophical systems. These differences have been provided by many authors. So as I've mentioned before, like our two Buddhist brothers here, they know the vastness of the philosophy. They know so many streams of teachers. And you can just go on and on and on with all the different schools. And a lot of Buddhists spend most of their lives just analyzing them. And so this is just a very short explanation of these schools. Now, it starts off with the word kiho, and everything to do with Buddhism, and especially Tibetan Buddhism, starts off with mantras and finishes off with mantras. And in fact, for a text like this, and why I'm explaining it, it's written by a fully enlightened being, and one of the highest enlightened beings on this planet, then everything is perfectly worded, perfectly encoded. There's nothing that's out of place. Now, the word kiyo means simply an invocation exhorting one to be attentive. So it starts, be attentive, start your meditation, cleanse your mind, don't be distracted by anything, listen to what the teacher has to say. O fortunate children, listen to these words. And the word fortunate children are disciples, students of the great ones, who consequently have auspicious karma, thus fortunate indeed to be in a position to learn these teachings. They are yet at the beginning of their path to liberation, hence children. And all of you are fortunate children, right? You've met a teacher that can explain to you the mysteries of what in the Bible is called the kingdom of God, to unknot the tantras. And the tantras, as I said earlier, are the highest Buddhist teachings. They came to the last of the schools after Yogācāra, while Yogācāra was unfolding. A fusion of Madhyamika and Yogācāra, that's the tantras. And beyond that, because it's the doctrine of the meditating yogis. And so the fortunate children means that you've got the karma with a great teacher from past lives that has now ripened. It's been brought to the present. You've re-met the teacher in his present incarnation, and therefore you continue with the doctrine. You're fortunate because of that. That everyone else is looking for enlightenment or doesn't know that such a thing as enlightenment exists, which are the great majority out here. They're unfortunate. They're miserable. They don't know it. Pain, suffering, the wheel of birth and death grinds them on from life to life. You're fortunate because you've got a way of escape from samsāra, right? You've got the mechanism of gaining liberation, of mastery of everything, of your high self. There's nothing more fortunate than that. Not having billions of dollars, well, yeah, or we'd all like to be very wealthy, and you're fortunately wealthy, but much more fortunate is to have the right teacher to teach you how to escape from causing suffering and death and the cycles of karma. And then listen to these words. The term mind is commonplace and widely used. Yet there are those who do not understand its meaning. And you'll understand this. Everyone uses the term mind, but you can see my book, it's a treatise on mind. Over 3,500 pages of words, of fine print words, trying to explain the meaning of mind. And even then, it's not very successful because to properly understand mind, you've got to go into meditation. You've got to learn it directly. Ultimately, it's the mind of God, the mind of the entity that created everything, from which everything emanated and to which everything resides back again. Every aspect of phenomena that you see around you is mind-born, comes out of mind and resolved back into mind. So to understand mind is to become a logos, or in Buddhist terms, a Buddha or Adi Buddha. Adi simply means primordial Buddha. And out of the Adi Buddha, or the primordial Buddha, comes the Dhyani Buddhas, the Buddhas of meditation. We also, in Buddhism, there's another type of Buddha called pratyakṣa Buddha, which the Theravada tradition uses, and that means the one who's involved in self-realization. They're not concerned with anything out there, only themselves, only their own enlightenment. And so those solitary ones. Now, a Dhyani Buddha, they are metaphysical entities, but they also genuine entities. So when I think of Dhyani Buddhas, me personally, I'm looking at the constitution of Shambhala, Sanatkumara, the three Buddhas of activity, the spirit of peace. We've got 5 beings that embody the attributes of the mind that governs this entire planet. And they are the Dhyani Buddhas, or the embodiments of that quality within Shambhala. Now, what this really is the 5 instincts. All of nature is governed by these instincts: self-preservation, the instinct towards sex, group or herd, instinct towards knowledge, the instinct of self-assertion of personality. Now, the instincts govern the kingdoms of nature, or the animal kingdom specifically. They're all governed by instincts. They evolve into the 5 sense consciousnesses. Now, in Buddhism, we have the 5 sense consciousnesses. Now, you know these are 5 senses, right? And the consciousnesses that are derived from the 5 senses. Now, in Buddhism also, they look at the 6th sense consciousness, which they call mind. So the mind governs all of these 5 sense consciousness. What I'm sort of getting to is then the 5 sense consciousnesses are what in Buddhism are developed to the nth degree to produce the corresponding wisdoms of the Buddhas of meditation. So each one of these Buddhas are literally the end result of the development of the 5 sense consciousnesses. And therefore you get Vajrayana, which is called the kāmadhātu wisdom, which is the sense consciousness of ether, or the little finger. And then you get akshobhya, the mirror-like wisdom, and that's the ring finger, or the sense of touch. I could go into all of these 5 sense consciousnesses. I mean, it's a bit of a distraction, but you get an idea that the evolution is from instinct to intelligence to intellect, and that which embodies the intellect. And then you go from that through meditation and through becoming enlightened, you develop the attributes of these Buddhas of meditation. So the tantric path is the path of becoming a Buddha of meditation. And so when he's saying the term mind is commonplace and widely understood, yet there are those who do not understand its meaning. Know what he's referring to. Its meaning is, yes, the extension of the senses to develop supermind. Those who falsely understand it, those who partially understand it, and those who have not quite understood its genuine reality. Thus, there has arisen an inconceivably vast number of assertions as to the nature of mind. And he's not just referring to the average human being who knows next to nothing. He's referring to all of the philosophies, all of these schools of Buddhism, all of the Hindu schools. So you can go into all of these particular schools, and you have to understand at the time when Guru Rinpoche was writing this, somewhere around 800 AD, Hindus and Buddhists were busy arguing with each other in various schools. Nalanda, the Buddhist university, that I think was still then existent. So you've got masses of debates, and any one of you can look at all the various different schools, and they all have different interpretations of mind and the powers of mind, the ramifications of mind, how the universe came into being, all of this, posited by the various philosophical systems. Further, since ordinary persons do not understand the meaning of the term mind and do not intuitively recognize its nature, they continue to roam through the 6 classes of sentient or rebirth within the 3 world systems, and consequently experience suffering, And this is the fault of not understanding this intrinsic nature of mind. With Buddhism, they've got the philosophy of the six realms. Now, I go into the six realms in my other books. Now, the six realms is of gods, asuras, human beings, animals, and pretas. Each of these, this wheel of birth and death. Now, these are just different aspects of mind. Pretas are shades, they're literally the entities of the astral plane. Big bellies, and they have small mouths, and they can't be satiated. The karma of desire and selfishness. Animals, you all understand. This is the theory of metempsychosis, where they say that you can be born into animal bodies. Humans, we all understand, it's another realm of suffering. Asuras are those that are jealous of the gods, and so they're always warring because of their jealousy. The pride aspect is very high, and the gods are basically entities on the heavenly realms that are full of beautiful things of desire that are satiated in great quantities, but eventually they all have to be reborn. So it's a sixth realm, and each of the realms I have a version of Avalokitesvara. They're preaching them to try to teach them how to become enlightened. That's the theory of the six realms. It's basically just a hexagon. And the understanding of the symbolism of the hexagon will give you an understanding of the six realms. As I said, my book goes into them, and I don't particularly want to go too much into esoteric Buddhist philosophy, because that's what it is. There's no such thing really as pretas or asuras, or if you wish, gods. These are all states of mind that the human conditioning goes through. The Buddhists that actually believe in asuras, that believe in Titans in these six realms, when they die, they'll actually experience that type of conditioning. Likewise with atheists that don't believe in heaven, hell, or life after death, when they die, they'll go into an atheistic state because everything is mind conditioned. If people believe in a heaven and hell state, well, that's what they're going to experience when they die. In the ancient Egyptians, they had their amenti and all of these stages of their after death. These are created by mind. And if you spend your lifetime believing in such a conditioning, then you're creating lots of thought bubbles. And the community that you're with, and maybe over quite a few hundred years, have been creating the same thought bubble for a long time. Therefore, there's a strong imagery that's been created by a lot of minds of these conditionings. Therefore, when you die, you'll experience that. And the atheist will experience torment of this zone that they don't understand they're in. But eventually the astral substance will dissipate, will wear away, and then the individual will begin to experience the astral plane proper, in accordance with their, if you want, karma, their desire body, how it was, what they did when they're alive. They go into a hell state, or they can go into a heavenly state. So as you can see, the Yogācāra philosophy governs what happens after death. Where you go to depends on how your mind was, how your emotions were, what sort of emotional energy did you put into it? Were you intensely believing this and intensely thinking of hell or these Asura and Preta, or were you just agnostic? All of this depends on the nature of what happens after life. It's actually for all of you quite important for you to begin to properly understand more about this astral plane conditioning, what happens in the life after death, because you're all spiritual teachers. You're all learning to teach others. And one of the main things that people are asking all the time and worried about, especially in this materialistic society, is life after death. You can see most of these people, they hang on to their miserable lives for as long as they possibly can. They go to doctors and get pills, and then they go into these nursing homes and they sit there as a vegetable, basically, being pumped full of drugs to keep the body alive when the mind is almost dead, it's gone. What for, right? It's because of this materialistic society that we live in. People are frightened of death. And they're frightened of what might happen to them. So it's your job to understand the astral plane, the nature of life after death, which is what this book is really about, is it not? Exoterically, it's about what happens in the life after death. Esoterically, it is the attainment of the awarenesses of the 5 Buddhas of meditation. So these 6 realms is metaphorically, there's a symbolism that's correct, but in fact, it only exists for those Buddhists that believe that those things exist. And then you get the lamas busy sort of reciting this to try to stop these people that have died from falling into the trap of going to one or other of these 6 realms. What they want that individual to do is to have a fortunate rebirth. In other words, a rebirth in a human kingdom where they can meet a guru, a teacher, that can lead him out of the snare of samsara, right? And all of you are being trained, teaching yourself to be a fortunate teacher, so that these ones, these fearful ones, can in time come to you, and most of it will be, how do I escape the wheel of suffering? Pain, suffering, pain, suffering. It is what Buddhism is about. All religions are really trying to teach that in their various ways, of course. Believe in God or believe in the Christ or Allah. But for Buddhists, and this is my pain has been this dogmatic understanding and interpretation of Buddhist scriptures. For instance, the 6 realms and reincarnation and the way it's normally interpreted as metempsychosis. In other words, you're born into animals and so forth. Therefore, I wrote that book, A Karma and the Rebirth of Consciousness, to try to fix up this erroneous belief of metempsychosis. And then this erroneous addiction to the concept of 6 realms. There's no such thing in reality, except mind conceived. Control the mind, understand the mind, analyze the mind, and then the 6 realms disappear. Yes?
Can I ask you a question about the 6 realms?
Sure.
What is the correspondence of the higher plane of the 6 realms? I think it's the gods, one of the highest ones. What is the correspondence with our philosophy in relation to the devas, the violet devas?
What you're really looking at with the 6 realms are really subdivisions of the astral plane. They're all really attributes of the astral plane. Even the God realms. You can just think of them as say, the 2nd subplane of the astral plane, or else the animal birth or human birth. And of course, you've not just got the 6 realms of Buddhism, you've got the hell realms, and I've got 18 hell. So it becomes quite a complicated philosophy. And in my writings, I also explain the hell realms, but you're looking at, again, this mental concepts. And all of you, each one of you here, if you're doing your meditations and working properly, when you leave your body, you're not going to go into the astral plane unless you have still some emotions and all of that, some sort of karma left. You probably go straight into hierarchy. You're working as an enlightened being. When you leave your body at night, you don't normally go into the astral plane. You go and do your service work as a bodhisattva within hierarchy. You're looking at a vaster scale of things as an enlightened being, and you're looking down. Before you go back into your body, that's when you normally do some service work on the astral plane, and you jump back in. And that's when you'll get your dreams. But normally, for most of the time, it's on a higher plane. And hierarchy is buddhi, or it exists on 2 realms, the higher mental plane or buddhi. Buddhi is shunyata, but it's not as the Buddhists sort of think of as shunyata. And the higher mental plane is the domain of the soul. So you either an enlightened soul, or you are 4th degree initiate or higher, and then you do the service work as the bodhisattva you are, right? Each of you are bodhisattvas, all of you are bodhisattvas. That's why you're listening to me. But after the astral plane is the mental plane. There's 4 subplanes of the mental. in the domain of the mind, and those of you that are much more mental will not get a lot of dreams. What you'll get is imagery from the mental plane or from the higher domains. And so there's not a lot of dream imagery on the mental plane. What it is, it's abstract concepts, ideas, streams of ideas. A scientist, for instance, they live in the mind, or mostly. You understand that highly sort of dedicated scientists, they're always in their minds and working up mathematical formula and things like that. They don't have a lot of the emotions. They're going to the mental plane, into the thought structures of humanity. So you get streams of ideas, and they revel in those ideas. So the astral plane, as you can see, is from the hell, which are the lower astral planes, all the way to heavenly states, which is normally the fourth, the fifth, or the sixth, counting from below upwards, as astral subplanes. Now, counting from below downwards, the last two, they're not zones of human habitation on the astral plane. There's only 5 subplanes of the astral, which is human unit experiences. And so the lowest 2 of those are the hell states. And the hell states depend on whether you're exceedingly selfish or full of hatred and spite, viciousness, that type of individual. So all of these realms are mind condition, as you can see, but you've got to add in the watery constitution of the mind as well. So it's karma manas. I don't know if I answered your question properly, but the correlation is not exact because the Buddhist philosophy is a philosophy of mind. And all of this stuff that you read in Buddhism, such as, for instance, the 6 realms, which the Buddhists believe, and which I am saying is basically an error, but it's all based on esoteric principles. There's right to it and the wrong to it. Even with the concept of rebirth into animals, there's a right to it and a wrong to it. For instance, Gautama, 2,500 years ago, he never, ever criticized per se the orthodox belief of karma, of metempsychosis. It was not the time then. And at that particular period of time, because of the relatively low level of consciousness of the great masses of people. Now, this is long before modern books. Science didn't exist. Medicine, as we understand it. You understand. You could go to an Indian farming village today, and you understand the type of consciousness that's there. Any sort of farming village in the third world, that was the society of his time. That's who he was talking to. Therefore, the normal or orthodox belief in reincarnation as metempsychosis, or these 6 realms, is appropriate because for their level of belief system, their level of consciousness, it still made them do the right things. Fear death, or the fear to do such and such because you may be born an animal or you may become a preta. Therefore, don't have strong desires. Don't sort of, overindulge in the thirst for life, if you wish. You can understand the concept of the big belly and the little mouth can never satiate and is always hungry because always desire for this, and this, where most people are at. They always want things. In our consumer society, you know it. People are not satisfied with what they've got. They want more and more and more. And that produces, in the Buddhist philosophy, a preta life. And of course, our monks, they know that. They're not into the world of desire. They've renounced all of that. Therefore, they become monks. They're not going to be born into the preta world. And then you've got the asura world of clashing titans, jealous titans. You know the type of people that are looking at the rich people with their houses on the hills and their fancy yachts and all of that, and jealous and wanting all of that, and they don't have it, and they do whatever they can to get that. They've been born as pretas. And then you understand the way that people treat animals. Well, some of them pets are nice, but people also abuse animals. Now, back in those days, they weren't really thinking of the way we Westerners look at dogs. They're looking at the way that farming people mistreat their donkeys. Beasts of burden. Can we put more on that camel's back before it breaks? How much can that ass sort of carry before it dies? that type of consciousness. Overworked animals, horses, and whatever. It's a type of thing that most of those people, for instance, that abused animals, then the Buddhist philosophy would say, yes, you're abusing an animal, you're abusing this donkey or whatever it is that you own. Well, you're going to be born as one of those. You've got to suffer your karma in that form. And you can see the teaching value. And the Buddha, therefore, saw the teaching value for the primitive people, their minds, and decided that wasn't the time to fix up the law of karma. It was fine the way it stood then. And he knew that later on, somebody like me would incarnate, who would fix it all up, rectify it. It was for a later date. And the same with all of the great ones. There's a whole history of evolution of when great ones incarnated. So the whole planning of the education of human consciousness was sequential. For instance, at the time of the Buddha and a little bit after the Buddha, that's a golden era. You think it's not just Buddhism, but in all the Buddhist philosophers that came, but you think of the great philosophers of ancient Greece, incarnating from the Buddha's time to the next few centuries, from 500 BC or thereabouts to about 300 BC. You get the classic age of the Greek philosophers. And then you get Lao Tzu and Confucius in China. Then you get to the Christian religion suddenly being born and the Jewish religion. So you understand that this particular period of time was a great effervescence of human evolution, human consciousness. But everything is sequenced, including my incarnation now. These books are sequenced. Before me, there was Bailey and Blavatsky. That was also part of the whole plan. And before the Buddha, you get the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, all those spiritual scriptures of Krishna incarnation, in the Krishna consciousness, that devotion. That came about, that Bhagavad Gita was when hierarchy itself was going through their second initiation. So hierarchy evolves, humanity evolves. The teachings are sequenced to come out in accordance when humanity is ready for the next step onwards in their evolutionary teachings, and then it comes. Therefore, when the Buddha came, humanity was ready for Theravada Buddhism. And Theravada Buddhism was just another one of the Hindu sects, basically. It was very, very similar to the Jain philosophy. There's a difference, of course. The Jains became very extreme with regards to their concept of rebirth, and so much so that their priests couldn't do anything. They basically had to be fed. And if they walked, they had to wear masks so they wouldn't breathe in any insects or anything like that. And then they carefully had to sweep in front of them so they wouldn't stand on any ants. So the whole philosophy was an extremism. And that was one of the main philosophies that the Buddha was competing against. And so he produced his middle way between extremes. We're talking about the 6 realms, life after death, and the doctrine of karma, which is associated with it. So when you're talking about the 6 realms, and this whole book, the Bardo Thödol, is the doctrine of karma. How does karma manifest? And again, karma is mind conditioned. Karma uses the conditionings of your mind and causes your rebirths in accordance to how you used your mind or mental emotions, what in my book is called karma manas, or desire mind. Karma, K-A-M-A, means desire. The proper translation is desire mind, but I'm normally using it in terms of the emotional mind. And that is the main cause for rebirths. Everything that you do is to control or to eliminate emotional mind. And then you have to be careful not to reside in manas per se either. Manas is mind. The substance of mind in our philosophy is called chitta. The term chitta vritti means the modifications of mind, or the way mind moves, its substance. The Buddhists have a stack of terminology associated with mind, whereas manas is mind, or the energy of mind. So I've read those statements out. There's 2 lists here in those 10 statements. And these 2 lists, again, as I pointed out, this is a tantra. And therefore you've got the 5-fold nature of things, the attributes of mind, the sense consciousnesses. And here, divided into two parts. And so there are two lists. The first is the philosophers developing a critical analysis of mind, and the second list concerns the development of mind in ordinary people. Paraphrasing, therefore, the first list is A, those who are plainly ignorant, B, those who speculate falsely, hence making ignorant assertions because of the vicissitudes of the desire mind utilized, because they come from an emotional bias and do not understand the nature of the mind. C, those who have partially comprehended the nature of mind, as theirs is a fundamentally intellectual approach. However, the subtleties of the dual nature of mind eludes them. D, those who have not quite understood its genuine reality. They have awakened meditative abilities and gained certain keen insights through the yogic methods of the various Buddhist schools of thought, but are not yet fully awakened. E, the consequence of all the above is that there are a vast number of philosophical systems and texts that abound via which various avenues of truth can be found. So the first 5 statements are summarized thus. Now, the second 5 statements of Guru Rinpoche's opening of this particular section of the Bardo Thödol, with respect to the ordinary people we have, it is taken for granted that the average person is ignorant of the nature of mind. B, the next step concerns the intelligentsia. Intelligentsia, of course, are those who are intelligently looking at things, who are strongly intellectual, but have not yet developed the intuition to listen to the voice of the heart, which can speak in a timeless flash of revelation. Then originally talking to him, I used the term pratyakṣa to explain this concept of intuition. This particular term has got a number of different interpretations in the books, but I translate it as to mean the intuition, the flashes of revelation, and all of you have received it. And there is in my writings, when I'm talking about this particular thing, pratyakṣa, it's not just something that you're walking down the road and you're thinking on, pondering about things, and suddenly you get a flash about whatever you're thinking about. That's one way of interpreting this particular concept. But another way, and this is the way that works for those of you who are initiates, that have gained enlightenment in past lives, is that this is a continuum of flashes of revelation that propels you towards bodhisattvahood or towards gaining enlightenment. So at first, your flashes are infrequent. As you become more and more meditative, they come with greater frequency and reveal to you much more about the nature of cosmos, of the inner realms, and of the realm of enlightened beings, past lives and things like that. So it's actually a continuum of flashes of revelation that increase in momentum as you walk the path to enlightenment. And this is the gain of your past lives. Now, our Buddhist brothers here, they do a form of meditation, which is walking meditation. And then it's another form, which is to open yourself up. Now, walking meditation is not just slow walking, for instance, going through thoughts or looking at your body and trying to control the body and things like that in a sort of rhythmic motion. In my particular case, I look at walking meditation, for instance, when you're washing the dishes. So you're washing the dishes, you're doing this chore, but the chore is not the important thing. At the same time, your mind is open to receiving impressions from, for instance, what you may have been reading in this book or any of the other sacred scripture, or what is it that's important in your life. And so all of you are living what we call the dual life of the disciple, the dual life of the initiate. One aspect of you, for instance, Aid's driving his taxi. Now, it's not too good to get involved in this form of meditation when you're driving, but I often, and it can be quite disconcerting because one loses consciousness for a few seconds, and you can't do that in the car, but I do it sometimes. And then I really have to sort of bring myself back into my body very fast. But what I'm trying to say is that you're doing your normal life chores, but that should become a ritual. This is seventh ray, an automaton almost. At the same time, you're meditating, and you're meditating on things of importance. And so one thing is you're aware of what you're doing, you clean those dishes or whatever it is, and at the same time, your mind is still, it's serene, it's a mirror able to reflect whatever is coming into it in any moment. And this is also the Zen methodology. With Zen Buddhism, it's different than many of the other forms of Buddhism. For instance, in Tibetan Buddhism, the monks go to a monastery and they do their rituals, they chant, they have breaks and they teach people and whatever, but they're fed. There's lay supporters that come and donate lots of money and whatever to the monastery. With a Zen Buddhist tradition, it's different. The Zen Buddhists, they're monks, they go out and they farm and they're making their own food. And so a lot of their time is actually that, farming. And the purpose behind that is that they have to develop this pratyakṣa while they're doing their mundane chores. They have to develop this dual life of the monk or the dual life of the disciple, meditatively involved whilst they're involved in saṃsāra. And this is the proper Yogācāra method, the method of Guru Rinpoche, Yogācāra-Mādhyamika. You don't renounce saṃsāra. You don't focus purely on shunyata. It's the bridge between that you are trying to achieve at all times. You gain enlightenment while you're engrossed in saṃsāra. You see the illusionality of saṃsāra, but you merge saṃsāra with your enlightenment or with shunyata. Shunyata saṃsāra bridge that you're working at all times. And this is the proper meaning of the walking meditation. In the Zen tradition, it's farming. It's farming or you're cooking. There's all sorts of duties within a monastery, as our brothers know. Some have to become the cooks and some washing the dishes or whatever. There's all sorts of communal chores. So the monks have to do that. But while they're doing that, the walking meditation continues. While the Zen tradition is doing the farming or the food gathering or the cooking, the preparation of food, the walking meditation, that fusion between shunyata and saṃsāra, making the bridge one. Saṃsāra is the reality. It is not the illusion in this Yogācāra-Mādhyamika tradition. Why? Because saṃsāra is your karma. Your karma leads you to enlightenment. You must ride your karma as you walk towards enlightenment. You cannot become a Buddha until your karma is cleansed. It's an impossibility. And a Buddha cannot become a Buddha if he's thinking only of shunyata. The path of compassion is also woven into this. This is the Bodhisattva path. It's not the path of a pratyakṣa Buddha. I mentioned this early on. It's self-realized one. They sit in one spot and only think of gaining enlightenment. What they're doing is damming up karma. They will have to have a life afterwards. This is what Mahayana Buddhism says. Lives afterwards to fix up their karma. The karma they did not experience, did not live out. I often have to meet or educate those that, for instance, if you spent a life in celibacy, then you've dammed up what? A certain karma of lots of sexual experiences from the former lives. Then there'll be a life that you may be quite sexually indulgent because that karma was dammed up. And so there's a balance. So the shunyata saṃsāra integration is this walking meditation carried through in everyday livingness, because your meditation is literally your karma. Your karma is literally that which produces enlightenment. everything around you, all of these aspects of samsara, these 6 realms of Buddhism. See, this is again the problem of the interpretation of the 6 realms. The interpretation is, oh yes, you die and then there's this Lama and it's reading out the Bardo Thödol for 49 days and you go to one of these 6 realms and then you're reborn again. But the reality is the 6 realms of Buddhism are experienced all the time. You can go through a preta or a surya or an animal-like state whilst you're incarnate in your consciousness, and you have to cleanse them. They come through you. And the shunyata is the intuition. It's the pratyakṣa coming to give you the revelation. It's when it meets samsara and it produces a bondage or fusion, and it tells you what to do next. Because the shunyata is cleansing samsara to give you the intuitive experience to teach you the next step, to give you the flashes of revelation. You can see the past, the present, and the future in a timeless flash. So this is the Madhyamika Yogācāra methodology. Samsara, shunyata, neither of them are illusional, neither of them are real. The fusion between the two produces the liberation. It's easier if you're a monk because life is simplified. It's harder when you're living in the material world because there's so many complications, so many ways of being distracted in your path. Now, with the samsara shunyata fusion, that means that when you go to work, for instance, you have to have a material job to make money, then you're that Zen Buddhist farmer working in the fields. That's part of the process. That's where the karma is at present. And you don't say, oh, I want something else in my karma. That's where the karma is. That's what you're cleansing out. And you're cleansing out something of the past life, or you're gaining experience once you master this condition that will lead you to the next step, and the next step. And because you're initiates means that you've gained enlightenment in past lives. It will lead you, if you follow this methodology, to liberation. This is the meditation, the true meditation. And then the shunyata samsara sort of nexus eventually produces seated meditation, where you sit and you can concentrate completely upon the techniques of awakening vision. All the time, you're working upon the cleansing of samsara. By that, it means more and more shunyata comes in. The vision intensifies upon the path. And as the shunyata comes in, it's burning away samsara until eventually all that is left is shunyata, emptiness, the void. And within the void is the all. So the samsara is the unreal, but the samsara is also the real because it's the karma that you've created that leads you to enlightenment. And as you're following that path, you're cleansing samsara, you're burning away samsara that leaves more and more empty spaces that's in between. That is the spaces of revelation, of enlightenment. The spaces of revelation, of enlightenment is mind, a pure mind. I like to use the term in this case, dharmakaya, for the higher mind, but the dharmakaya really means dharma and kaya, the body of dharma. The dharma is the Buddha dharma, but the Buddha dharma is the mind of the Buddhas and the mind of all the Buddhas of the 3 times, past, present, and future, is the dharmakaya. And their mind is the 5 Buddhas of meditation. So as you burn away samsara, and the samsara is conditioning out of 5 instincts turned into the 5 sense perceptions, and then that is converted through this pratyakṣa method, walking meditation, the extension of it, into the attributes of the 5 dhyani Buddhas, the perfected transformations of samsara. Samsara is 5-fold. It's the pentagon, the pentad. And again, you can see here we've got these two different pentads in this particular opening statement of this section of the book. Then there's a next phrase, and this is not so easy to properly explain. It goes into the three world systems. Now, these three world systems are viewed in terms of the attributes of consciousness. And in Buddhism, they call them the realm of desire, kāmadhātu, which produces all of the urges and karma, causing one to perpetually seek rebirth in the six realms. And next is the realm of form, rūpadhātu, which refers to the conceptual thought forms generated by the empirical mind. Rupa means form. And finally, we have the formless realms, the arūpadhātu, associated with the subplanes of the higher mind. Now, these three particular realms, kāmadhātu, rūpadhātu, and arūpadhātu, is the very basis of Buddhist philosophy, of both in Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. And with that is the entire philosophy of the Buddhist stūpa. This is a book, The Symbolism of the Stūpa. The stacks of it. This is by Adrian Snodgrass. Here, for instance, you have on this particular page a diagram of the stūpa and the stacks of it. Now, most of the Buddhist monasteries, they are built in the form of a stūpa. There's one there, and there's Kumbum there. So all of the stūpas then brings us to all sorts of cosmological diagrams, all associated with this fundamental dhātus. Now here's a little diagram. This is just the top part of the stūpa, and he's got the world of desire, which is kāmadhātu, the world of form, which is this middle part of the stūpa, which is rūpadhātu, and then the formless world, which is the arūpadhātu. So everything to do with the stūpa and all of the parts of the stūpa are these three realms of Buddhism. In our Bailey philosophy, we're looking at the physical plane, the astral plane, and the mental plane. And technically, those are the three realms. But it's not quite like that. They also, in the Buddhism then, goes into the heavens. So here we've got the Mount Sumeru, the Yama heaven, the Shuta heaven, where Maitreya is said to be the Nimirati heaven, the Paranamrita Vasvaratin heaven, the Brahma Kaliya heaven, the Brahma Purita heaven, the Maha Brahma heaven, all the way up to Shunyata. And so the stūpa gives you all of those parts of the Buddhist universe and the Buddhist meditation. So with the parts of the stūpa, we've got the six realms of heavenly desire, and you get the first dhyana level, the second dhyana level, the third dhyana, and dhyana means meditation level, then you get the fourth dhyana level, and then you get shunyata. And so the top part of the stūpa are all these levels of meditation, from the first, second, third, fourth. You got the very top of the stūpa, way up there, a little crescent moon, and on top of that is a flame, Tibetan called tingu. And so that flame is your enlightened principle. If you get the concept of the Om, there's a circle, like in our symbol of our particular logos, you get the top, the word Hum in Tibetan. And so we use the three colors there, and that's the finger disappearing into shunyata. And that's the very top of the stūpa, the full enlightened mind. So there's a vast philosophy when you're going into these three dhātus, the rupa, the arūpa, and the kāmadhātu. And the six realms are also involved in that. If you want to look at the stūpa, in my fourth volume, on my mandalas book from page 171 to 8, you can read that up there, and I give quite a bit of information there on stūpa. So the three world systems, in our philosophy, we're thinking of the physical plane, the emotional or the astral realm, and the mental plane. And the mental plane is dual. There's a lower mind and an abstract mind. But the Buddhist concept is a little bit more complicated, because they're not so much looking at the planes of perception, but it's also there. They're looking at attributes of mind and the way that a meditator goes through the planes of perception. Now, these first, second, third, and fourth dhyana levels are really the first, second, third, and fourth subplanes of the mind, the four lower subplanes. And then you get the crescent moon, which is the abstract mind. And above that, then is the flame that goes into shunyata. All that is part of the abstract mind, which is the logo of our particular organization. So you know where that comes from now. It's the very top of the Om or the Hum in Tibetan Buddhism. It's the essence of the Buddhist philosophy. It's the synthesis of the 5 Buddhas of meditation. There's just far too much philosophy to properly explain in a short time. This is the problem with Buddhism. It's immense, the philosophy, and you can just go into one little symbol like that tingle of my logo, and the whole philosophy can be explained from that. And it's just vast, vast, vast. But it's all got to do with the analysis of mind. So we've gone into the 3 realms, and then I was going to go into the next section, deals with the differences between the various yoga systems, attainment in Buddhism. And then there's 12 of these. I'll do this next week because though it's not mentioned here, and I didn't explain it all in this book, these 12 go into the 12 signs of the zodiac. 12 signs of the zodiac are veiled in these 12 because we go into 2 aspects of mind. The pentagram in relationship to those that are enlightened and then the average human being, because there's the 5-fold nature of things. But the Buddhism is also the 12 petals of the heart lotus, and the 2 are integrated. And so we start with the 5s and then we go to the 12. And so we've got either the heart lotus or the heart that is the head. So I'll go into that next week because you can see this book will take a long time to properly explain. You're learning the Buddhist philosophy as we go. And you can see Buddhism is an incredibly beautiful philosophy because it's got such vast information veiled in short terms. It's different than our esoteric because, as I said, the Buddhism is the analysis of mind, whereas in a sense, we that derive from the Theosophists are more looking also at the Hindu attributes of substance, the devas. So we're looking at the planes of perception. Now, there's a difference when you're looking at planes of perception, just talking about the stūpas and cosmology, but cosmology is not so important for Buddhism as it is for Hindus, as it is for the philosophy which I use, the esoteric philosophy. What is much more important for Buddhism is mind, meditation, gaining liberation and enlightenment. The Buddha never talked about God. He refused to answer the question, what is God, what is not God? It's one of those questions that he remains silent on because there's a huge number of Hindu speculations on this. He didn't want to get caught up in a whole lot of speculations. The Buddha was just very practical. He said, these are the steps to gain enlightenment, the Eightfold Path, and you follow this and you'll know. Other than that, there's no point in speculating. But in our philosophy, it's different. This is a scientific analysis now. It's a 3rd ray methodology, whereas the Buddhist methodology is 4th ray, golden. The Buddha's emanation is 4th ray. His teaching is the 4th ray. Buddhism is ruled by the 4th ray on the whole, whereas our teachings are 3rd ray. So the proper analysis of mind, mathematical analysis, rather than the middle in between or the harmony in between, 4th ray. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we go into meditation?
We can say also that the 3rd ray methodology is also part of the Yogācāra philosophy that doesn't go into the yogic aspect, isn't it? When we stay in the intellectual part of the mind instead of going to the experiential of the abstract mind of how this come about, isn't it?
Yes, but the Yogācāra is by definition mind, and mind is by definition 5th ray. So it's more an empirical analysis of mind, whereas the 3rd ray is the higher aspect of the 5th ray. So you get the numbers 357 or 1357. I often find it difficult to properly define the 5th ray. I call it scientific reason. or scientific reasoning, because it's the energy behind scientific reasoning. So it's more empirical. And whereas with the third ray, I define it as mathematical, exact activity. So the fifth ray is more sort of, if you want, meditative. And the objective of the fifth ray is to discover the third ray, the activity of the third ray. So the third ray is activity that is mathematical in its precision, that rides on the gain of the fifth ray, if that makes any sense to you. Whereas the fifth ray is, if you wish, analysis. It's intellectual, it segregates this from that. The third ray has looked at the segregation between this and that, and then manifests that segregation in terms of precise or mathematical activity. And therefore, the third ray includes the work of the Deva kingdom. The manifestation of the activity is eventually grounded in the seventh ray in terms of ritual or cyclic activity, power. And in between the third and the seventh ray is the fifth ray, which is the understanding of it all, of how it comes to be, or how to arrange or organize that ritualistic power. So it's 3, 5, 7. The fifth ray and the seventh ray are but sub-rays or sub-aspects of the third ray. When you're looking at the third ray, then you're looking at the 5 Dhyani Buddhas in a fusion. When you're looking at the fifth ray, then you're technically looking at amitabhas, discriminative wisdom. And so it's one of the 5, whereas the third ray is the complete 5. And the Yogācāra philosophy is more the amitabhas, discriminative, inner vision, sometimes I call it, or inner wisdom.